An elderly couple mysteriously vanishes from their home. Would they ever be found? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Joe and Mattie Harvey. Viewer discretion is advised. Joseph Joe Harvey was married to Mattie Harvey, who everyone would call Tia. They lived in Lewis Chapel Mountain, which is in Tennessee. I guess this is a little outside of Chattanooga. This was a really, really tiny town. One of those towns where, you know every single person who lives there. And it essentially, from what it sounds like, it kind of borders the Appalachian Mountains. For about 30 to 35 years or so, Joe and Mattie ran this little tiny gas station / convenience store that was literally just a couple hundred feet away from their home. This was the only gas station and convenience store within several miles. And it also doubled as sort of like a place where the community would come together and talk and gossip and just, talk to each other. They would call this like their local gathering place. Joe and Mattie were such a fixture in this community. They had been there for decades. Everybody knew them and everybody loved them. They were this sweet, unassuming couple who just all they cared about was providing for their community and, making everyone happy, giving people what they needed. And when someone needed help with something, they were there to help them. Now, they kept pretty much all of their cash. They kept there in the store. They did not have a bank account or like a really secure safe. And a lot of people knew that. And so that would cause concern for especially, their family, like, hey, you need to put your money in a bank account. And Joe was like, no, we're okay. We've been doing it this way forever. Why fix what isn't broken? And so they would say, okay, well then can you at least, have protection here in the store? Can you have a gun? Joe was like, no, we're not about that. We're not violent people. And in a sense, it sounds like there were people who believe that Joe and Mattie, their trust in people, was something that was eventually going to get them in trouble. They really kind of only ever saw the good in people and didn't really think that there was a bad person living there that would ever do them any kind of harm. But unfortunately, that was not the case. And the people that would harm them were much, much closer to home. On March 4th, 1991, it was an early Monday morning. There were people who were trying to get inside the convenience store that Joe and Mattie owned, but the door wasn't opened. It was locked, which was something that had literally never happened there before. Joe and Mattie, they ran this place like clockwork. It was always open by 9 o'clock in the morning, but this day it wasn't. And so people thought something just felt off about this. So the sheriff was called because the sheriff, knew Joe and Mattie really well. I mean, he was really acquainted with them. They were friends. And so he goes to the store, confirms it's locked. He looks inside from the windows, doesn't see anything unusual. He then walks a couple hundred feet over to their house, and he walks up to the door, and he realizes that their door is unlocked, which is also something very unusual for them. When he opens the door, he discovers something completely bizarre. Joe and Mattie's house had been set on fire. There was, the entire living room area, their dining room, their kitchen, everything was burnt to a crisp, which I can't really find much information, but nobody called in about a fire at this house. Now, to be fair, this is a very rural area with not a lot of neighbors nearby. But obviously the fire wasn't so bad that it completely destroyed the house, like nothing caved in, but it charred the entire inside of it. You had furniture that was completely decimated. It was gone. It was just down to its wire frames. What they didn't find inside, though, was Joe and Mattie. They found a lot of fire damage, a lot of stuff completely burned, but no bodies were inside that house. Once the TBI, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, got involved, they began a more thorough search of the property, and they found little blood spots just outside on the front porch there was blood and like hair, like kind of mashed into the blood. Fire and arson investigators quickly determined that this was an arson. They found the empty gas can inside the house. This was the gas that was used to start the fire. So they know somebody did this. The question is, though, is because Joe and Mattie are missing, was it them that did this? Which would have been completely bonkers and out of this world, but you never know. Or did somebody do it to their house and kidnapped Joe and Mattie? Did they kill Joe and Mattie and hide them somewhere? No one knew. And from what it sounds like, there was a lot of money missing. So whatever happened here, they were quickly beginning to lean more towards that this was a robbery. But the thing is everyone in this community essentially knew that they kept cash, like in the house and at their store. So the suspects were the whole town, basically. Or possibly the couple made themselves disappear because for whatever reasons. However, no one really truly believed that. They really felt from the get-go that there was foul play involved. I mean, you had the house burnt down, but you also had blood and hair found. It wasn't adding up to Joe and Mattie doing this to themselves. It was really adding up to somebody did something to them, but then were they still alive or not? The police and volunteers did search that entire town, that entire surrounding area, the woods and everything, to see if they could find Joe and Mattie, but they had no such luck. Joe and Mattie did not have kids. That was just something that never kind of came to their life. However, they did have nieces and nephews that they treated like kids. One of those nieces was probably their closest niece. Her name was Cheryl Holland. Cheryl had a daughter that Joe and Mattie treated as if that she was their granddaughter. They really doted on Cheryl and on Cheryl's daughter. They loved them so much. They gave them everything they needed or wanted. Within days of Joe and Mattie's disappearance, another disappearance in the family occurs. This time, Cheryl Holland. She is now missing. A couple of days after that, Cheryl's yellow pickup truck was found abandoned near Interstate 81 at a truck stop, which was about 2 hours away from where all of the, where Joe and Mattie disappeared from. The truck was unlocked. Inside, they found her keys, they found her purse, her wallet. Everything was in there. They found a necklace that she wore all the time on the ground outside of the vehicle. That led them to initially believe that there was foul play involved here too. Was Cheryl kidnapped? Was Cheryl killed? Or was Cheryl making herself disappear? They then interviewed Cheryl's common-law husband. His name was Eddie Wooten. Now, he tried to give Cheryl an alibi from the night that Joe and Mattie disappeared. He said that, she had taken Ed to some hotel or motel outside of town, and then when the police asked him, well, what's the name of the hotel? And he said, I don't know, I don't remember. Well, where was it? I don't know, I can't remember. Okay. Police began to wonder, was Cheryl directly involved in the disappearance of Joe and Mattie? When they asked other family members, they all said there's no way. Cheryl would never do that kind of thing. Cheryl loved them. They loved her. So they bring Ed, her common-law husband, Ed, back in for questioning, and he then tells them he had taken Cheryl to a treatment center for cancer. They asked him again, okay, well, what's the treatment center you took her to? I don't remember. Okay. They asked other family members, and they said that Cheryl had borrowed money from people for these cancer treatments that she said she was getting. But digging into that, looking into medical records, they found out that Cheryl did not have cancer. She was lying. And that's the alibi that Ed had switched to say, oh, that's actually where Cheryl was. No, because they actually found out that Cheryl was working at her own local truck stop on the day in question that he said Cheryl was in cancer treatment. Basically, he was lying. Cheryl's missing. They're beginning to piece this together that Cheryl probably wasn't missing. She was probably trying to hide. They confront Ed again and say, listen, we know she was not at this cancer treatment. We know she didn't have cancer. What's going on here? And then Ed looks at them and says, quote, if I tell you what happened, what's going to happen to me? End quote. And then he just told police what happened, or what he says happened. On the day that Joe and Mattie disappeared, Cheryl was in fact working at the truck stop, like police had discovered. Then Cheryl came home, and Cheryl told Eddie, I need more money. We need more money. We're broke. Because Cheryl was basically all about money. So that evening, Eddie and Cheryl get into their truck with their 2 children, and they were planning to go to Cheryl's mom's house to pick up her paycheck. On the way, they stop at a gas station where Cheryl fills up a gas can. Then they go to Cheryl's mom's house, they pick up the paycheck, and Cheryl's mom actually lived in the same area that Joe and Mattie lived in. And so they next go to Joe and Mattie's house. That's when Cheryl tells Eddie, "We're going to rob my aunt and uncle. We're going to take their money." And Eddie says, "Well, I'm not on board with this. This is insane. We're not doing this." But Cheryl was persistent. "We're doing this." So they leave their 2 kids in the front of their truck. They get out. Cheryl, before they go inside, Cheryl looks at Eddie and says, "Do you have your gun on you?" And he says, "Yeah, why?" She says to them, quote, "We have to kill them. They're not going to hand over the money, so we have to kill them," end quote. This whole time, Eddie says he's like, "No, we're not doing that. I'm not killing anyone." Basically trying to make it look like this was all her plan, and that she was the one who was going to kill them. And Cheryl was like, "We have no choice. We have to. We need their money, but we have to kill them to get it." So Cheryl enters the house first. She sees Joe just sitting on the couch watching TV. He says, "Hey, Cheryl, how's it going?" She goes, "Oh, it's going good. Where's Mattie?" He says, "Oh, she's in the bedroom." And so Cheryl goes back in there. Eddie then tells police he walks into the house. He sees Joe sitting on the couch. Eddie lifts up his gun, points it directly at Joe, pulls the trigger, and shoots him in the head. Mattie hears the gunshot, and she begins to run out towards the living room, where Eddie lifts up the gun again and shoots Mattie directly in her head. Both of them were dead. Cheryl then takes the money that was from the house. She steals it. Then her and Eddie take the 2 bodies and shoves them in the trunk of Joe and Mattie's vehicle. Eddie gets into the truck and follows Cheryl in the now stolen vehicle to near the Tennessee River. They drove across the Alabama state line. And there at the Bridgeport Ferry area at the Tennessee River, Cheryl takes the car that the 2 bodies are in the trunk, and she gets it and pushes it into the river. And they sit there and watch it sink. Then Cheryl eventually goes back to the house where she takes the gasoline can and sets the house on fire to destroy evidence. But something happened where the fire burned a huge portion of the house, but it kind of ended up stopping on its own because no one called in a fire. And when they found the house, the fire was gone. It's believed about $150,000 in cash was stolen. And still, their family was like, "There's no way Cheryl did this. Eddie's lying. She's not capable of doing that." Well, on the gas can that they found at the house, they actually found, the very bottom of it, they found a bloody thumbprint. Now, Cheryl's fingerprints, for whatever reason, they already had her fingerprints on file. And so out of curiosity, they compared the bloody thumbprint on the bottom of the gas can, which was in the house. The gas can was the one that was used to burn the house down. That thumbprint was an exact match to Cheryl's thumbprint. So they know she was a part of this crime. Next, police will go to the Tennessee River area where Eddie says the car had been dumped. They comb the river for a couple of days, and eventually they find the car. They pull the car out of the water, they open up the trunk, and in the trunk are the bodies of both Joe and Mattie. Both had been shot in the head, just like Eddie said. Eddie is arrested and arraigned, and he is charged with the murders. But they don't know where Cheryl is. He doesn't know where she is, or he's not saying where she is. There were numerous sightings of Cheryl over that general area, but every time police got a tip on her where she might be, when they got there, she's not there, and she's gone. And she manages to evade police, and she successfully goes on the run, while Eddie, her common law husband, is facing murder charges on his own. In February of 1992, this case airs on Unsolved Mysteries with the hope of finding Cheryl. It airs, and then 45 minutes after it airs, they are flooded with tips. In Rollingwood, Texas, someone calls in to say, "I think the woman you're looking for is my coworker." This woman had been living in Austin, Texas for the past year and got a job at this little gas station. Police get to this gas station where the woman calls in to say, "I think that's my coworker," and they find a woman named Amy Elizabeth Forrester. That's the name she's going by. They ask her for her ID, and the ID says Amy Elizabeth Forrester. But physically, appearance-wise, they know this isn't this woman. This is actually Cheryl Holland. And the police just ask her directly, "Are you Cheryl Holland?" She doesn't even fight it. And she says, "Yeah, that's me." So they promptly arrested her and they brought her back to face charges. On June 30th, 1992, Eddie pleads guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. He is given 2 life sentences without parole. On April 29th, 1993, Cheryl Holland also pleads guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder. She was given the same thing, 2 concurrent life sentences without parole until 2025. She got the option for parole. But as of right now, she is still in prison. Eddie died in prison. And they did all of this, Cheryl did, for money. She killed her own flesh and blood, the 2 people who loved her dearly, who gave her everything she wanted, who treated her daughter like their own granddaughter. By the way, Cheryl's daughter was now living with Cheryl's mom. But they gave up all of that. They gave up their lives. They basically made their daughter an orphan, all for money. When all Cheryl probably had to do was ask them for some money, and they probably would have said absolutely. But she had to kill them. Was she directly the planner of this, or was Eddie lying? You know, it's not really known for sure. What they do know for sure is that both people were involved in this murder. They know that for a fact. In terms of who started the arrangement, who plotted this, I mean, it's probably Cheryl, since she knew them more than Eddie, but it's not known 100% for sure. But in the end, Joe and Mattie got the justice they rightfully deserved. But that is it for this case, True Crime Roonies. I gotta say bye because the battery is dying. Please subscribe, follow me over on TikTok, and recommend a case to me. My email address is listed below. If you want to recommend a case, just give me the name, the person, where it happened. Okay, until the next case, see you guys later. Sorry, it's just the battery's flashing. Okay.